Alright, this is just going to be a quick hardware tutorial for the Outrun cab. I'm not going to go into super detailed depth. There goes the plastic cover there. Kongs R Us already did a better video than I did. Really good quality. I followed his video to do my own hardware mod on this cabinet, so I recommend checking him out. What I will do though is go over some of the things that I did a little bit differently. That way, if you're interested in doing it the way that I did it, you'll be able to. So let's take a look here. We have the control deck for the Outrun cab. We got the wheel, the buttons, the shifter. Let's take a look at the back here. So we've removed that plastic cover and removed the stock encoder board. And what we've replaced here is with the GeekPi 2 encoder board. This board's pretty nice. It has the JST connectors already here for you. So a lot of these 1-up buttons you can just simply plug right in there directly. There's not going to be any need for wiring. For me, I changed these buttons out to the long style stem, like the HAP buttons with clicky micro switches. But you're still able to use just a standard connection and plug right in. There's no wiring that's necessary for this. Same thing for the steering wheel itself. It's a 3-pin JST connector, and you just plug it in right there. This board right here has digital inputs along the sides here, and then the analog inputs are in the middle right here. It also has an amp, so that green piece you see up here is the output for it. And then right below that is the standard 3.5 millimeter headphone jack for your input for audio. And then below that you have your USB for power and data transfer. The middle right here, follow Kongs R Us video on how to plug all these in. It has them labeled, so this is the x-axis, this is the y-axis, so on and so forth. The x-axis moves left and right, which is what you want for a steering wheel. You want to move left and right. The y moves up and down. So for the steering wheel, because I want it to move left and right, I plugged it into the x, which will move me left and right. The one thing that I did different from his video, besides just changing these buttons, and this is really easy, they just screw on, micro switch, plug them in, not much to them. I changed how I hooked up the audio. He used the video encoder board and did the audio out through there. I'm using the audio out from the GeekPi itself because I want the stock volume switch to control my volume just like it would on a non-modded cab. So what I did here, just like he shows in your video or in his video, the headphone jack, got this from Amazon. It's standard 3.5 millimeter female connection to 4 wires here, and it's a black, a green, a white, and a red. These 4 wires are going to plug into your audio output, which is this green spot you see on the board here. Your input comes from here, and then this will output to your speakers. Traditional speakers have just a left and a right, and they have a positive and negative, so 2 wires to each speaker. So we have 4 connections total for stereo sound. So what I did, once I plug in the audio from the computer, just a standard 3.5 millimeter to a 3.5 millimeter male to male, coming from the output from my computer right into the board here, this outputs to this adapter here. The stock speakers plug in here, and that's how you get your sound. I have it hooked up so that these 2 wires here, these are my right and left positive. I wanted to make it so that the standard stock Arcade1Up switch, the on and off, had a function still. I decided that I wanted that function to be to turn the speakers on and off. If you don't hook up a a positive and a negative to each speaker, you're not going to get sound. It wants both that positive and negative. So all I did was basically trick it into thinking that I've disconnected the negative wire, which cuts my sound. I did that by having the positive connected here, my negatives route around to the switch here. You can put there's 3 poles. You have your leftmost, your center, and your rightmost. Top and bottom kind of linked together. So I have my left and right channel on the leftmost pole for sound, and then the center I have routing out and into the headphone jack here. That makes it so when I have the switch over, it creates a connection. These wires, it goes from here, it connects, it doubles back into here, goes up, plugs into the stock speakers, I get sound. When I pull this back, this switch moves over here, meaning that these two are connected. It disconnected from here, making it so that my negative is basically disconnected. I don't get sound anymore. So that's how you do it to get a positive or basically a mute switch out of it. The way that I did it to get the volume controls working, this same thing, you have your 3 poles. It sits in the center naturally. In its center, it's a neutral position, so that's just nothing, no action, no inputs being sent through. When you push it over, it connects the leftmost and the center. When you push it to the other side, it connects the rightmost and the center. So what I did here is I took just a standard button connection, and I have for my volume up, I know that pushing the switch this way is going to give me volume up. So on the top row of pins, and it doesn't matter if you put the black on one, the red on one, as long as you put them on the pins like I show you here. So you want to use the top row, and you want to put one wire on the leftmost pin, one wire on the center pin. That'll make it so when you push it over, it now makes a connection. It thinks that this is just simply a button being pressed. This button is controlled for volume up on this board, and it'll raise my speaker volume. Same thing, I have my volume down here. The way we'll do that, you're going to do the bottom pins here. You're going to put one on the rightmost pin, one on the center pin. And that way when you flip the switch this way, it makes a connection here, and it'll move your volume down just like a button press. That's pretty much all there is to it. It's not too bad. It's pretty simple. I went with the red on the outside, and my centers were my black, but again, it doesn't matter. They're non-polarized, meaning that there is no positive and negative on these. So if you flip them, if you put the black over here, the red on the other side, it's not going to make a difference. It's still going to work just fine. For my other buttons I have, you can see they're just JST connections right in there, and that's about it. For the shifter here, mine started squeaking pretty bad. If you take these out, you can take it apart and put some lithium grease in there, get it lubed up, because it's just plastic on plastic. It feels a lot smoother now. So if you already have this off, I do recommend taking these out. It comes apart really easily, and just throw some grease in there. Even if you wanted to spray just a little bit of WD-40, just make sure you kind of shake it out so it doesn't drip everywhere afterwards. The reason you see the tape here is I switched these to clicky micro switches, but they're not exactly the same size as the Arcade1Up. So the Arcade1Up actually snap into place. The ones I have don't, so they can kind of fall out a little bit. And the way that these are, they're just kind of sitting in there, and there's this chunk of plastic. So when you move the shifter, it just pushes the button. When you move it again, it pushes it again. There's really not much to it. If this moves over a little bit, it won't depress the button anymore. The shifter will still move up and down, but it doesn't give you the function that you want. So I taped them in there so that way they don't move. They stay where I need them to be, and everything will work like it should, and I don't have to take the control panel off every other day to kind of make some adjustments. Some other things that I did, I used these little PCB feet to hook up the converter board, so that way you can get video signal out of your stock monitor. These you can just simply screw into the back of that metal panel that you have in the back of the cabinet, and then plug or screw your encoder board on top of that. You don't have to worry about screwing into that metal piece back there. That metal piece is simply a shell. It is not the actual screen back that you're actually going to screw into. I'll show you here. This is a stock 1-up screen. This is what the back of a stock 1-up screen looks like. You can see there's no screw holes, nothing like that. Nothing like what you would see when you traditionally open up the cab, and that's because this simply sits in that metal shell, and then that sits into the wood, and then that standard board screws onto the back. Let's go over some changes or some things that I did to the actual cabinet itself. We have my Sega stool that my wife made me. Alright, so just like any other Arcade1Up mod, it is a mess of wires. I'll go over what I did to hook up the power switch. The power switch is just a standard button. That's all it is. Standard hat push button to a micro switch. From that micro switch, I have these two connections that go down. It's this wire, and I don't know if we can follow it, but if you see, it plugs in to that header right there. Every motherboard has a header set up like this. It's going to be your hard drive LEDs, your power LEDs, your power switch, and your reset button is what all those pins do. If you look up your motherboard manual, you'll find a diagram of what headers do what. You'll just need to find the one for your power switch and plug that in, and that's really it. For this is my coin button. To get power, I connected to the 12 volt on the PC power supply there. The yellow wire is the 12 volt. To do that, all I did was I took this SATA connector, so it plugs in a male SATA, this is a female here, and I cut off two of the wires, and I just left the yellow and the black, which is the yellow is my 12 volt, the black is the ground, and that plugs in for my button for power, and it goes back up into the cab for my marquee. When you cut the stock connection off the marquee, you're just left with two wires. One's colored, one's black. Black's your ground. The colored is going to be your actual positive, the 12 volt there. I just wired those up, put two wire nuts on the end of them, and then came over here, spliced it into this yellow. You can see you can take two grounds and put them together into one, just like I took two positives, this red and yellow, and put it together into one. This red here is the positive for the LED for my coin button, so it lights up when I turn the cabinet on. The other black is the ground for that LED. It's red just because I had red wire, but I could have made it yellow and make it match, I guess. But that's what you do for that, and you'll simply just plug it into any one of your SATA connections. So, for example, this one here, if I plug it in, which I don't know if I'll be able to with one hand. I don't even know if I'm going the right way, to be honest. Yeah, I am. There we go. All right. So now it's plugged into the actual PC power supply. So when I turn it on, I'm going to get power to my marquee. This dangling back here, this is your stock Outrun speaker connection. This is what plugs into that 3.5 millimeter female on the encoder board, or for the output, and that's how you're going to get your sound. I have my USB hanging right here. That's how you're going to get data and power for the encoder board. And then this is just simply USB and headphone adapter flush mount. You can buy these on Amazon. And then it's just a simple nut. You fish it through, tighten it down just like you would one of the buttons themselves. The only things I had to drill was this J panel here, and it was 1 1/8, I think. Hole saw is what I used. For my pedals, oh man, I can't really see that too well. I drilled a hole. Let's see if I can move the lamp. There we go. I drilled a hole through the bottom of the cab there using a 3/4 hole saw, and that's my connection for my pedals. The pedals are just JST connections. They just keep connecting over and over. The reason I have them zip tied is so that way they don't ever come loose. But this is what they look like here. The reason I had to do them over and over is just because they're not quite long enough on their own. And I zip tied them together here, so it made it so it was one wire. And then I zip tied it. You can see each connection around the connection itself. That way they don't become loose. And then I just daisy chain that all the way from the pedals down here. And then this will plug into the encoder. And I'll be able to use the brake and gas. As far as how to get into the pedals themselves, Kongs R Us, again, shows you how to do it. If you just flip these guys over, there's just some screws you got to take out. You have some visible ones here. There's also screws underneath all of these pads that you see down here. And then once you get under there, you'll find this guy here. There's two potentiometers with JST connections that are plugged in directly into this board. You're not going to need this board anymore because you're going to just daisy chain those JST connections all the way up to the new encoder board, the GeekPi encoder board. So this, you can just unplug it, unscrew it, and you won't need it anymore. It's gone. We have over here stock encoder board, stock PCB for the Outrun cab. This is what I bought from Amazon for those SATA connections. So it's a SATA to a Molex, but I don't need it to be a Molex. So cut it. Cut off the ones you don't need, or you can leave them if you want. And this is what I used to connect that. And then this is what I used for my power button. So this you can buy on Amazon. It's a PC power reset, hard drive light, and power light, I think. It's like a little repair kit, and you can see that it's got the buttons on one end, all of my connections on the other. You don't actually need to have it all put together like this. You can simply take it apart, and then it'll just leave you with the two pins down here, and that's all you'll need. What you do is you cut off the plastic piece up here. You're not going to need that. You just simply cut it right here, strip that wire. Once that wire's stripped, add these little connections here. And honestly, if you really, really wanted to, you didn't even need to do the connections. On these micro switches, there's little holes, and you can just like fish it through. It's kind of chintzy that way, but I mean, it'll work. But if you want to do it a little more proper, hook up those connections. You plug it into the micro switch. These micro switches, again, are non-polarized. You'll put one in the bottom and then one in the middle. This bottom pole here, if you switch it, it'll make it like the button's constantly depressed, and then pushing the button makes it like it's not, but that's not what we want. We want it to make it so when you push the button, it is like it is depressed. So how we have it there works exactly like we need. I'll show you real quick. We will almost went landscape like an idiot. We're going to push this button here, and you can see power marquee lit up. PC came alive. Everything's starting up. So that's just a brief overview on what I did to get the hardware running. You're still going to use a video encoder board like you would on any other updates. That's nice. Any other Outrun mod. This one just simply uses a PC instead. So whatever output you have from your PC. I think I have DVI. But you can use HDMI if your video card supports it, VGA, whatever. The hardware, again, is very simple. Follow Kongs R Us. He uses a PC. Get it going. Once you have yours up and running, come back here because I'm going to show you guys the hard part, getting the software on it. We're going to start with MAME, and we'll move on to Sega Model 2, Sega Model 3. We'll do some Naomi, and Techno Parrot, I think, is everything I have. Stay tuned. Thanks.